Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. You are in the gap with Hussain. Now, the episode that we have today, I'm really excited about having this conversation, not just from a professional point of view, but also from a personal standpoint. The guest that we have today, his name is Lloyd Thompson. He is a entrepreneur. He has a wealth of experience, over 25 years of experience within the industry. He's worked for a large number of very reputable multinational companies, including IBM and Siemens. Currently, he is heading his own entrepreneurial adventure that is called VirtualDOO. It is an operational management consultancy where he helps digital businesses and businesses in general optimize their operational side, and basically he helps them get off the ground and streamline their operations. I'm sure Lloyd would be the best person to tell us more about that. But what interests me more than the professional side of his journey is the personal side. We'll obviously get into that a little bit more. I don't want to give out any spoilers, but I feel ever since I sent him an inbox on LinkedIn, I did get this vibe that, it would be a really nice conversation. And I thank him for making the journey all the way out to the studio and have this conversation with us. Just before we head into the conversation, I would ask all of you guys to take a second out of your time and hit that subscribe button. Also, you can see over here, we've got all of these, our presence on these social media platforms. We upload all of our short form content over there. They're basically bite-sized pieces of all of the conversations that we've had in the past. So it's very shareable content and it's very relatable. If you guys do get a chance, check these out. And let's jump in straight into the conversation. Lloyd, thank you so much for being here.
Hussain, I'm delighted to be here, and actually this is super exciting for me. I've seen your previous episodes, but also to be here in person in a studio, which is a new experience for me. So I'm super excited to be here and be a guest on your show. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, mate. The honor's all mine. Now, there's a lot that we need to unpack within this episode, but I always tend to start from the start because that gives us a lot of context about the person and who they are. So I guess for the audience, just take us right back to your early days. Where are you from? What your early life looked like, and up to your graduation or your early education.
Sure. Okay, so I grew up in a place called Farnborough. Farnborough is about an hour south of London. And I guess how things all began with me, Farnborough is next to an army town called Aldershot, which is the home of the British Army. So I would have grown up building bases and, hanging out on my bike and doing things like that. And I think for most people in that area, that the destiny was to join the army.
Sure.
And so I think that was the natural course. And I enjoyed all of those things like camping out, hanging out, doing things with the Army cadets, which is kind of like scouts for the Army. And but in the background, I'd also taken an interest in IT.
Right.
And this kind of happened accidentally. This is because I had grown up in playing Nintendo, my friends' Nintendos, and I had saved up from my paper round money to buy a Super Nintendo. It had taken me weeks.
Sure.
And I'd have been 12, 13. And I once announced to my parents, I'm going to go down, I'm going to buy a Super Nintendo. I said, how did you get the money for that? We haven't talked about this. And so a decision was made, and I thought this was outrageous at the time, that we were going to buy a family computer. They were going to go halves with me on buying a family computer, which I thought was an outrageous thing for a 12, 13-year-old. And now this computer, they don't make this kind of thing anymore, but was half PC and half games console. So it's called a Amstrad Mega PC, and it shared the monitor, and you could flick over one side and you'd have a Sega Mega Drive, and on the other side is the PC, and what they shared was the black screen. And I had no interest in what went on in that black screen at all.
Yeah.
Until a friend of the family came over and started typing some words into the black screen, and I thought, what's going on over here? And I guess now this feels kind of like the Matrix. Type in these things, and what I later discovered he was doing was upgrading the operating system for us. So when he left, I went in and I thought, well, I've learned a few things from this guy. I'll go and type some words into this black screen. So I typed some words in. My parents weren't around. I really stuffed up the family computer, good and proper.
Awesome.
And so we had to get him back. I don't know what he did. Wiped, reinstalled, all of this stuff. And I vowed, I'm not going to do this again. I promise. Well, it turns out I lied. Unfortunately, after a while, I saw what he did. I saw how he fixed it. Let's have another go. A couple of weeks later.
I have a very similar story. It's about how my interest in the engineering side or science in general got started off. So I had a Sega. I had a Sega, right?
Yeah.
And there came a time, like in all of our childhoods, where we stopped playing the Sega, and then after a few years, we suddenly decide, oh, I forgot I had a Sega at home. Maybe I should fire it up again, right? So I pulled this thing out of the cupboard, and it had collected dust, obviously, and it wouldn't turn on for whatever reason. Now, I was so determined to get this thing working again, I took a screwdriver out, and this is me, like 5 years old or something, right? I opened the thing up. I was like, okay, let's see what's inside. And that is when I opened up and had a first look at a chipboard and a motherboard, and how all of it began. I have absolutely no idea what I did. I swear to God, I probably just poked my finger at a few things. It started working.
Wow.
I was like, I'm a genius. I was born to do this.
You are an engineer from the beginning.
I'm a natural.
Did you blow into the games cartridge?
I think I did. That's all. I think I probably just blew the dust away.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it started working. And that kind of gave me a huge amount of confidence, a huge amount of overconfidence, I'd say, that, hey, maybe I can do science.
Yeah. And that's it. That was the spark for me. So I definitely relate. And from that point on, I started getting into computers. And after I'd broken that computer for the second time, the family friend came back and he gave me a book on MS-DOS 5. I'm like 12, 13. Now, this is one of Bill Gates' early operating system.
Dark ages.
The dark ages, very early, not very well written. And that inspired me. Like he said, if you're going to break this thing, at least read this book first. And so I got into that. And what I later realized is that I was incredibly technical for someone that young. And even when I was 16, I realized that I knew more about computers than most people. And so around about 16, where lots of my friends were now signing up to join the army, I started to realize that while that was a natural course for many, and I know there's a need to have a military, but a lot of people their purpose or where they wanted to go and join the army. They were prepared to go to war. Whereas that was actually not in my mindset at all. I was in it for probably, when I look at it, the wrong reasons. I wanted to go climbing up, build a base and shoot a gun at a target and things like that.
You wanted to play army?
I wanted to play army, yeah. I didn't want to actually do army.
Yeah.
And so I realized I was in that for the wrong reasons. And then I discovered that actually people in IT, they do pretty well. And my humble ambitions of being able to one day own a car, have a couple of weeks of holiday and perhaps own somewhere someday.
Yep.
When I realized how much money people made in IT, I thought, wow, I can do this.
I can do it.
So that's why I later then studied engineering at university in the UK in Southampton. And that for pretty much the first 20 years of my career, I've been somehow on the IT side of a programmer or a manager of mainly IT folks.
Nice. Interesting. So does your family have a background in the army? Either of your parents?
We've got a huge lineage actually in military. Interestingly, my father, he was actually never in the military. He was in the fire brigade and the police.
Yeah.
He's retired now. My brother was in the Navy, but now he works in the education space. But I think going to university was, from where I was living, we were very much a working class family. And so the idea of going to university and racking up a huge amount of debt was not a popular idea. But my parents didn't fight it. They said, okay, we don't know if this is such a smart idea. How are you going to pay off that debt? I know lots of people go to university. Are they actually going to be able to get a job? And that is a real thing for many people. But I had it pretty clear in my mind that I wanted to go into IT. It was something I was really interested in. I was really interested in programming. And so it served me really well. And so for many people with IT careers, I still think that's a very, very good option, even though AI is here now.
Yeah. So what year was this when you went to uni?
Oh, I think it would have been 99, 2000.
Okay. Yeah. It's just the turn of the century.
Yeah. And I just missed so people were getting huge. I was at university when people would have been getting huge contracts to deal with the millennium bug. That idea that if suddenly the computer turns zero and everything's going to go wrong. Yeah, Y2K. And then, but while I was in university, so I signed up for a degree in masters in one. And the reason I did that was because it wasn't that I had the intention of doing the masters because I knew that I could drop out. It was more of it gives me an option if I want to take that. And actually it turned out to be a very good option, because in 2003, when I would have finished my degree, they had the dot-com bubble burst. And so IBM, who had sponsored my, provided a bursary for me while I was at university, which was awesome, they were letting people go like anything. So trying to get a permanent job there when I finished my studies would have been very difficult. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to stay in education for another year. Perhaps it's another good notch on the belt, some kind of more experience that might separate me from others. And yeah, it was great. I don't know how much the master's degree actually made a big difference, but it certainly gave me something to do while the working.
Of course. Being
in the working place was not going to be so easy in my first year of my career.
And like you said, another notch on the belt. I mean, that would have been time spent productively rather than just waiting around.
I think the master's year was much less about exams and more about group projects.
Yes.
And that actually is, I think a lot of the things that you learn at university, like you might learn a programming language or some kind of technique that will probably be outdated, but I think the things that are important are how to learn and how to do these group projects. Because, you know, is the programming language that I would have learned when I was at uni still relevant and up to date today? It's moved right on. People are using different things. But the group projects were really helpful. So I did get a lot from that.
Yeah, of course. And I believe, especially with IT, the way it's gone in the past 20 years, I think resilience and the ability to unlearn, relearn, and, you know, completely new concepts or update yourself with the latest languages or whatever's going on, that's the best quality that any IT engineer can have.
So that is a really interesting point. I had, in my last while I was in corporate world, my last stint there, if you like, had quite a large, high-performing team, and it wasn't always like that. And when I got this team to begin with, I had a lot of characters who were experts, but they were high ego, not collaborating very well, and it meant that if someone went on a holiday or you know, someone moves to another company, it's going to be a problem. And so eventually I reshaped the hiring and started finding people who were not necessarily the expert, but was someone who was a good team player. So I was focusing much more on culture, like what's the person going to be like? And I had before it was a policy in the companies or fashionable idea to start hiring more ladies or hiring diverse teams. I was hiring that anyway because I was hiring more on the soft skills of people. People who were going to be, can we work together? How can I be a learner? I don't have such a big ego about what I've produced. I'm more about, is this thing going to last when I'm not here? And that's when the difference was really made. So that mindset piece is so, so important. And I think now in the industry, that's being recognized a lot more.
Getting out of your own head and understanding the bigger picture.
And just the culture of, you know, what's it like to work with other people.
So you graduated in early 2000s and then you followed that up with a master's. At this point in time, did it ever occur to you that you might be leaving the UK and moving to some other country?
That's a really interesting question.
Because sorry, to put some context into that, because early 2000s and when the just before the .com bubble burst, I believe there would have been a lot of transition between IT professionals within Europe. The rate at which IT was progressing in the early 2000s at that point, just before the IT bubble burst. So a lot of people moving around from the UK to maybe Germany or France or like other European countries to get work.
For me, I think I was just focused on just getting a job. You know,
that's first priority as soon as you graduate. I just need money in the bank account.
And I just wanted to get out of. I mean, Farnborough is not a bad place. It's just I'd grown up there. I wanted to go to London. The streets weren't paved with gold as I thought they might be. But I wanted to move out of my hometown and see what the world was really like. And that started in London. And then for quite a few years, I actually worked in consulting businesses and actually moved around the country a bit. And so that in itself was an amazing experience. I was living out of a suitcase. I was living out of the service departments and hotels. And England is a really culturally different place. Every 50 miles, the accents change.
Yes.
And the culture changes. And there's a stereotype, which I'm going to say is true, actually, about the north and the south of England. Okay. And the south, where I'm from, they call us southern fairies. Like, they think we're all a bit soft. And the people in the north, they call them northern monkeys. It's a bit of a joke.
Yeah.
And they think that the people in the south are all wealthy, and that's not true. We're not from wealth. And they think that the northerners are unsophisticated, and that's not true. But here are the true things. In that, when I've travelled and worked in the south, if I talk to a stranger in a pub, because I'm new, I've just set up in a town, I wouldn't find that people would reach out and talk to me as much. I wouldn't feel like it was as welcoming.
Yep.
But in the north, people would really seek you out. I loved working in the north of England. And, you go into a pub and people would just like, oh, who's this newcomer? Get involved. And I remember getting on the train or the metro in Newcastle, and I was talking to someone, and I got heckled from the end of the train by a stranger. And he said, "Here, Rupert, we're not going to get the buffet cart through here for you," because he's picked on a southerner. But that's his way of making a connection with me. And so moving around the country got me a good appreciation of actually how important it is to build connection. And it became a skill, actually, I think, being able to make friends quickly. But it wasn't on my mind that early in my career that I was eventually going to move to Australia. But there's a common theme through travel that if you go into the north is much less populated than, say, the south. You find that in places that are less populated, they're not big cities, people are more inclined to reach out to you and make you feel take an interest in you as opposed to the big cities.
Yeah. I've traveled to the UK once in my life. I've been to London. My sister lives in Scotland. So I've seen Scotland, beautiful place, absolutely beautiful. And that is true what you said, that people are, there's a certain warmth that you feel on a Saturday night in Glasgow.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. So I can completely relate to what you said about that. Okay, so at this point in time, when you're working with all of these consultants, is this the time when you're working with Siemens or IBM? Or
so Siemens would have been, I think that was my last contract in the UK.
In the UK.
Yeah.
And you were working within the IT department of Siemens.
Yeah, so that's a really topical project to talk about at the moment. So what I was doing for Siemens is, in London, there's a thing called the congestion charge if you want to drive into London. And Siemens got the government contract to extend that out to what's called the low emission zone. So trucks or lorries, if they drive through and they don't have a certain device impacted, the camera will pick it up and they get a charge. And recently in the news in the UK, they've extended that out to way further out, and it's causing a lot of protest. But that was a consulting project that I was working on, and it was, there was elements of high security involved because it hooked into government systems. It was a great project.
Yeah, amazing to work on something like that. Okay, so eventually, what was the kicker at that point that, okay, now I feel like I want to move out? What was that point?
So this is just one of life's random things. That was a 9-month contract, and excellent. And what I've always done as a contractor is about a month and a half before the end of the contract, I'll say to my manager or whoever's in charge, I'll say, I like working for you, I like to keep this contract going, but at a month out, I start looking for other contracts. And that's the truth. And so a month and a half out, I told the director there, this is what's going to happen. And so when I hit the month, I started looking, and it just so happened that one of my friends who was living here in Australia, he said, look, it's actually some projects I could probably get you involved in, or, you can talk to these people. And actually a year before, I'd gone to his wedding in Australia.
Oh, okay.
So that was where I came to Manly, which is in the northern beaches of Australia.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, check this out. You can live here, you can get the ferry to work, go surfing on weekends if that's your thing.
Weather's amazing.
The weather's the weather in England, look, it's not that bad, but here the winter in Sydney is, well, for me, it's wear a jacket, hold an umbrella. It's actually not bad at all. For an English person, it's amazing. So I'd come here to a wedding a year before. I'd experienced Manly, and I thought, wow, this Sydney is an amazing city. I'd love to come back here. And then when my contract for Siemens, I'd been there for the last month or so, I thought I'd have a look around, and I found multiple people who I'd reached out to in Australia who said I could probably get you a conversation with someone. So I never went via a recruiter. I just knew people this side of the planet and just reached out to them and said, hey, do you know anything that's going on? So originally I was actually going to go and work for Suncorp in Brisbane. And then my friend said, hey, actually I'm working at this company called Macquarie Bank at the moment. And actually, at that time, Macquarie Bank were not well known in the UK. Here, of course, everyone knows of them. And he said, "Look, I think they're a really good company, and perhaps I'll give your resume to so and so because there's probably a project they'd be interested in you working on." I had an interview, and I ended up landing a contract while I was in the UK.
While you were in the UK, right? And what year was this?
That was 2008. So I arrived here in March 2008. And Macquarie Bank then was very different to the way it was now. So this is pre-financial crisis.
That's right. 2008 was when the financial crisis hit. Oh, okay. Okay, now that throws a nice twist on you coming around here right at when the financial crisis hit. What was that like?
So working at Macquarie Bank in the pre-financial, so March 2008, I was working in the equities team, so with the traders, and there were very emotional folks, the big spending up and very emotional about their jobs, very excited, and people were making a lot of money. And there were free lunches and there were free drinks being sponsored out every Friday. And so for someone that's just come to this country, this was great. Meeting lots of people was amazing.
What could go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? And so for me, it was only supposed to be, and it was a 3-month contract with them at the beginning to do a very specific thing. It was to investigate the bottlenecks in their hedge funds platform. And at that time, because of my work for Siemens, I was in the line of work where I could identify performance bottlenecks and work on those things. So the energy in Macquarie Bank in equities at that time was, amazing energy. It was a great place. Now, I don't know how much longer before, but when I was in the UK, I had been on what we call it here in Australia, a bucks party or a stag do. Yep. And I'd gone to Amsterdam, which is an interesting place. And we had a very lively weekend. And in one cafe, my friend, who was a co-worker of mine, said to me, there's this thing, it's called the Mongol Rally, and you drive a car with an engine it's a charity event. You drive a car with an engine of less than 1 litre from London to Mongolia, and you've got to raise X amount of money for charity, and most of the cars don't make it, and it's an adventure. Do you want to do it? I said, yeah, that sounds amazing. He's like, right, let's shake on it. Now, I must admit, I'd had a few drinks when I shook on that.
Yeah. Amsterdam wouldn't have been the best setting to make a huge decision like that.
Yeah, it's not known for sobriety, is it? and so I shook on it. And the next day he said, do you remember what we shook on last night? And yeah, I do. And I like to pride myself. If I say I'm going to do something, I will do it.
Timeline-wise, you've already landed this job with Macquarie Bank in Australia.
I'd already landed this job.
And now you're in Amsterdam at this point.
And so I've explained this poorly. So rewind maybe 6-7 months before I was at Siemens or whatever, I shook the hands and said that I would do this Mongol Rally at some point. Yeah. Now I'm in Australia in that 3 months window. So I've now moved and I know that I'm going to do the Mongol Rally at some point. Yeah. And when that 3-month contract for Macquarie finishes, I'm going to fly. And this is what I did. I flew back to London. Yep. And me and my friend, Simon, we bought a 1984 Citroen 2CV with a 600cc engine. So that's a 0.6 of a litre car. And the average car here is like 2.5 litres plus. Yep. And we set about driving this thing from London to Mongolia. And why I bring that up is because when we were talking about pre-financial crisis, global financial crisis, this all happened while I was on my travels. So 3 months at Macquarie, it was something was brewing, but we didn't really know it was going to hit. Yeah. And then I went traveling and I was disconnected from technology entirely during that time. And then when I got back to London, I was like, okay, wow, the banking systems have collapsed. What does this mean for me? What am I going to do? Wow. And I thought, well, I've got a working holiday visa for Australia. I could fly back. Maybe I'll get some more work. Maybe I won't. I've got enough savings. If I don't get some work, maybe I'll go backpacking. I mean, how easy is it going to be for me to get a working holiday visa again? I might as well fly back to Australia because the working options in the UK were not going to be great either. Yep. So at that point, I didn't know I was going to stay in Australia. I just, it was so funny that the Mongol Rally, this adventure that took about a month, happened to be bang in the middle of the sort of before and after of this financial crisis. This was like the punctuation mark on the end of it.
Yeah, what I can think about it is, have you seen Planet of the Apes?
Yeah.
They go up, they go into that hypersleep, and behind them the entire country, the entire planet's gone to the apes, quite literally. And
That's
then they
a great
come
metaphor. I come back. I don't remember it being like this. What happened?
What happened? I leave for a month, and
then this happened.
Society's collapsed.
Yeah, it was
Wow.
insane. Yeah.
Interesting. So a lot of stuff over there to unpack. Okay, so for anybody who's not keeping up yet, the Mongol Rally is this charity car rally where you're supposed to take a small, medium-sized car. It's not supposed to be a rally car. It's not supposed to be a sports car in any way or a sports utility vehicle, SUV in any way. It's just supposed to be the shabbiest car that you can find.
Got it.
Yeah, it's the shabbiest car, the smallest engine that you can find, and you're supposed to drive that from London to Mongolia
That's right.
through all of Europe, through Western Europe, through the Central Asian states, and ending up at Mongolia.
That's right.
Right. And that would have taken you, a month to do?
Yeah, it took me a month, and there's no fixed route. It's quite an unsupported charity event.
Yeah.
And
what is the charity for, out of curiosity?
So there were two charities there at the time. There was one for sort of like poverty in children of Mongolia,
Yep.
and I think there was a cancer charity as well at the time. So
Yep.
they instantly resonated. You can see the need.
Yep.
So that was the purpose, and the rally itself, yeah, it took a month, 30 days camping out, and it's I could fill a whole podcast on this. Don't get me too long.
Yeah,
on this topic,
of
but
course.
it's one of the best adventures of my life, and there were so many lessons that I got out of that I
Of
take
course.
today, and one of them is beyond about the Ukraine. So the first hub, just to give you an idea of the route, London through the Channel Tunnel, France, Belgium, Germany, Poland, Czech Republic, Poland, Ukraine, Russia, Kazakhstan, and then some Russia and Siberia, and then 2,000 k's across the Gobi Desert of Mongolia to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. So you really get to go to all these places. It's unsupported in the sense that they provide a start line and a finish line, and then you can go anywhere you like.
Yeah, and
So
you just have to figure it out.
you figure it out.
Yeah.
And that is actually one of the best adventures I've had on it is true escapism, like as in to the extent that you go on holiday, quite a lot of people go on holiday and they just take their routine with them. This is, where am I going to sleep tonight? Where am I going to get food and water? What am I going to do? And you can't do this without getting help from people. You're going to put yourself at the will of others, and that was one of the things that actually you watch the news and you get quite a lot of pessimism about the world, and this country's good and this country's bad, and that's your perspective of the world. But what I learned is that nearly every time I drove into one country, they would have fear of their neighbours. But each country I was in, they were incredibly helpful. And 2 days in, I was packing up my tent and I dropped my glasses and I stood on them and I couldn't find them until the next day. And I needed these glasses I'm long-sighted, but I need them for reading maps, all sorts of things. And they were stuffed. And I remember one of the first challenges I had was trying to find an optometrist in the Czech Republic and see if I was going to get another pair of glasses. And I gave them to the guy behind the desk, and he's like, wow, you've really stuffed these up. And I said, yeah, well, can you get me anything that's going to work? I don't care what it looks like, anything here that's going to be roughly my prescription.
Yeah.
And he puts them under the table and he's like, so tell me about your journey. And so he's doing something under the table with his glasses. And I said, and I explained what I've explained to you. And it's a charity event. He went, it's a charity event. Oh, it's really interesting. Anyway, by the end of our 10-minute conversation, he puts back on the table my glasses that have been fixed. And I couldn't understand. They were just all completely mangled when I gave them to him. And he's been there with pliers and he said, look, I don't know how good these are going to be. Just don't be careful with them, but they should be getting you through the rest. And no charge. He said, you're doing this thing for charity. It'd be delightful to help you. And I saw kindness like that all the way through. Every single country, people would help. And just as I was saying earlier about the difference between the north and the south of England, the places where I found the most helpful people were more in smaller communities outside of the big cities, where people are like, who are these travelers? Where are they what's their purpose? What are they trying to do? And they would get involved and they'd help us.
Interesting.
So many things to talk about there, but a very great
Amazing.
adventure.
We could stretch out an entire complete episode
We could.
just based on that on that journey. I actually believe you should maybe like write or blog about this,
Yeah, I should
because
do.
it's something that you don't normally hear a lot of people doing something like that. I mean, in this day and age of social media, there are a few accounts that I follow on Instagram who are these just nomad travelers who just document their travels all over the world. There's this guy on Instagram called Kamran on Bike. I know him because he's Pakistani, so I have that connection. This guy, he's based in Germany. He's an engineer, but what he does is he started taking his bike out for rides, like just his push bike, right?
Oh, his push bike.
His push bike, right? He started taking them out of like one city at a time in and around Germany, and just started documenting his journey and the people that he met and everything. Then it got to a point he traveled on his push bike from Germany to Pakistan.
Wow, that's a bike ride, isn't it?
That's a massive ride, right? And he traveled the length of all of that through different terrain, and throughout he documented the people that he met, the people that offered him food, the people that offered him help to fix his bike, place to stay, people just coming up offering him fruit on the side of the road, stuff like that. And that journey basically blew up his Instagram account, because now people started following that there's this guy who's on a bike and he's traveling through Europe and South Asia, and people went along for that ride. And with your experience, it's important to document these things, A, because they're a unique perspective, but B, people love to live vicariously through experiences like these, because the way everyday life is set up, everybody's so caught up in their routine and their responsibilities and their obligations that sense of escapism is something that is almost romanticized now, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the ability to just shake everything off and just go off on your own into the wild, not knowing where I'm going, where I'm going to stay, where I'm going to get my next meal from. It's romanticized to this point.
I think that I felt even in Mongolia, in the Gobi Desert, that even when petrol and water is low, you would see the traditional tents of the Mongolians, they're called gurs, you'd still see them dotted around. And you'd know that if you get in trouble, they'd be able to have some fuel or sort you out. And if there's one message I'd want to share about this travel, it is that, especially in these times where we are seeing media that portrays people as good and people as bad.
Haves and have-nots.
Yeah. Well, it's like I don't think there are a good country and a bad country. I just don't believe that at all. I feel like, governments have agendas and different groups have agendas. But when you really meet the people, they're everywhere around the world that I've gone, everywhere I've always experienced kindness. And when you watch the news, it takes you down this slant of it's fear sells. So that's the topic. But I remember, the Russians was concerned about the Kazakhs were concerned about the Mongolians and so forth. I probably experienced in Kazakhstan the most accommodating people I've ever like. That was my favorite country on the Mongol Rally. I thought, wow, these people are amazing. We stopped and asked someone for directions to the police station, because you have to go and get a stamp when you're traveling. And in the end, it was just easier for him to jump in with us. So he jumped in, took us to the police station. The police were impressed by our cars. They came out, had a photo of us. They let us skip the queue. I'm not sure how good that was for the people in the queue. And then he said, hey, are you hanging around a bit longer? But perhaps we'll take you out to a local Kazakh place and have Kazakh food. So we said, yeah, absolutely. So we went to this local Kazakh place. We had the traditional food with the people. And we loved it. And at the end, we were like, this is amazing. How much do we owe you? And they said, oh, nothing. You're our guest. We're delighted to have you here. Just blown away, by these people that were so proud to have us as their guests. The sense of hospitality in a lot of Central Asian states, in South Asia, I can vouch for this because it's my own background. The sense of hospitality and the sense of putting your guest in ahead of yourself. That's something that's very deeply ingrained in the culture, right? And to the point that there are certain cultures. I can speak for my own country, like back in Pakistan, within the Pashtun culture or within the Sindhi culture, even within the Baluch culture. It is to the point that if, like back in the olden days, it was said that if somebody is your guest and somebody comes after them, like having a quarrel with them, or somebody is coming after them to maybe to have a fight with them, that fight is now your fight. Right. Wow.
Because they are your guest, they are under your protection.
Wow.
So their fight is now your fight. And this I'm talking about like centuries ago, like back in the tribal days. But that sense of hospitality, that sense of
it's like ownership almost. It's like,
ownership.
we're looking after you.
Yeah, we're looking after you. Yeah, it to this day, even in this day and age, that sense within the culture, it runs very deep. And that translates itself in this day and age in terms of hospitality, helping people out where they need, looking after guests, and just people just love sharing their culture from people who are coming from outside. And I think in this day and age, like you said, with governments having agendas and groups having agendas and all of the negativity out on the media, I think what collectively as humanity, what we need is to have a little bit more empathy and a little bit more openness between cultures. Right? I mean, just look at this, like the conversation that we're having right now, or conversations I've had with other people on the podcast. It has opened me up to perspectives that I would never have otherwise had, from people's journeys. But also, it has shown me that there are certain overlaps between all people and all cultures that create this human bond between all of us. And for example, like you growing up in a military town, fighting against the expectations of joining the military and finding your own voice and figuring out what you need to do for yourself. That's something that a kid in the furthest part of Europe, or the furthest part of South America, or the furthest part of India, going through post-adolescence would feel the same.
Yes.
It's something that we can all relate to, So yeah, it's very important to find those overlaps between all of us. So good on you. So Mongol Rally, I'll post a link for the article that shared his journey. And I'll also post a picture of the car that he took. So you guys can actually have an idea that driving a car, like I'm sorry, but it's a shabby car. It's the smallest, dingiest car that you can imagine, and to take that from London to Mongolia, I can't imagine. It must have been an adventure.
It's the most mechanically simple car you can buy. That's the reason why we went with it, because they made those from it's the longest running production vehicle there was. They made them from 1940 something to 1980 something. Yep. And so, I have a background with computer engineering, computer science, electronics, but mechanics, not really my forte. Yeah. So this thing you could fix with duct tape, so it was pretty good. Yeah, the Citroen company, I believe, models around that time, those cars were actually built for farmers, I believe. Those vehicles were targeted for people who had a lot of errands to run. Well, the original requirements for the Citroen 2CV are definitely not politically correct, but they're funny to hear for people today. Yeah. It was the Citroen 2CV and the DS around that time they're proud of their suspension. That was an innovation at the time. And it was that the car would be able to be driven across the freshly ploughed field and could be repaired by the farmer's wife. Okay. So there you go. Those are the requirements. Okay. These are the requirements. Being able to fix by the farmer's wife. Yeah. I mean, there you go. Interesting concept. But that's also really historically interesting, because in World War II, which would have been around the time that car was being made originally, the women of England were being drafted as mechanics. So actually, the farmer's wife probably was the best person to fix it. Right. Okay, so I'll bring you back to let's bring Lloyd back to reality now. Yeah. Okay, you're back in Australia. You're on a contract, or you just finished your contract with Macquarie Bank at that time. Yeah. The financial crisis is hit, unfortunately, and now you have to make a decision whether you're continuing to stay in Australia or you're going back home. And you have a very bleak idea of what you're going to be doing in the next coming years. That's right. So actually, when I finished the Mongol Rally, I flew from Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, to London. Yep. And then that's when I made the decision. I thought, well, there's not going to be much for me here. I might as well finish my working holiday visa in Australia, whether I find work or no work. Yep. So I went back to Australia, and I was very lucky because Macquarie Bank were letting people go left, right, and centre. And when I called them up, and I just thought they were going to laugh at me down the phone, but when I called them up and said, hey, is there any work for me? They said, well, actually, one of the people that you were working with on the settlement system, he's just chosen to relocate to Melbourne, and we need someone to fill that role. It's still a crucial role, so we've got a contract for you. So I was so lucky to get that role filled. Now, the thing is, my visa situation meant that I think I could only stay on 3 months chunks, and I had to change job or something. Because it was a working holiday visa.
Yeah,
and then
you have to keep renewing it, I believe.
You have to keep renewing it, and then maybe you need to do fruit picking or stuff like that. So I managed to get another 3-month contract. And what's funny about that is that the guy who is losing his role because he needs to relocate to Melbourne. That wouldn't be a problem now, today where we work remotely. It wouldn't even be an issue.
Yeah, of course.
So I took this work, and then things started to change really quickly in that every 2 weeks we'd get called to a room. They're letting this department go, that department go because of the financial crisis. There's certainly no free lunches going around anymore.
No more parties.
No more parties. There was always a confusing restructure announcement. I mean, perhaps it's just my perception of it, but it's like, what has actually happened here? What team is being cut? And
not a very conducive environment.
No, and I then discovered. So my experience at that time, I'd been in the UK. I'd been consulting. I'd been also hands-on technical. In this role, when I started, I was very much in doing project work. Project's all about building the new, right? But then there was a restructure announcement that I only learned about a month or two later what it actually meant, and that had affected me. Okay. And I still had a role, but I'd been restructured into operations.
Yeah.
And the way I'd managed to fix my visa situation at the time was that the company that was payrolling me were able to offer me a work-sponsored visa if instead of being a contractor as such, I was now a consultant for them but placed at the same place. I don't know if this is still able to be done these days, but that's the way it worked. So I was a consultant for this company and they provided my work-sponsored visa. However, it pretty much meant that if I lost my role,
you'd lose your visa.
I would lose my visa and I'd be back to the UK. And that might not sound like the best, you'd go back to the UK. But for me, both of my parents, certainly at that time, were in no financially strong situation. And so I would not be able to, I don't think there was any space to live with them. Yeah. It would be not only a huge blow to my ego, but I just don't know how that was going to work.
Don't come home, Lloyd.
Yeah, I didn't want to go back. So when I'd been restructured in operations, it wasn't like, this is a first world problem, by the way, but it wasn't like I had a choice in the matter of, it was no longer doing the project work, building the new. It was, there's a problem with the trading system and you've got to fix it right now. That's where it was becoming a very different job. Operations, trade support. I remember probably the moment, and for the viewer, they can't see the hair that's missing in the back of my head here, but I distinctly remember the moment where I think that came out. It was like 3:30 and the market closes at 4:00. And they'd placed this huge trade, and the way that the trading's done, even to this day, is the big trades between the brokers are done over the phone, and they make the big agreement on the phone, but then they, after the fact, put it in the system and click send, and the other side acknowledges it. So they'd done this deal. It's all verbally agreed and recorded at both ends, but the money's not gone to the other side, or the trade's not been seen. Yep. And so suddenly I've got one person, then two people, then three people, then mounding at my desk saying, this problem needs to be fixed, we've got to fix it. Yep. That's the moment I remember my hair falling out. But what was interesting that came with that is working in this high pressure environment, I'd reached the point of acceptance where if I didn't fix this problem, nobody was going to die. I just got to that point, like, no one's dying. This is going to be uncomfortable, but no one's going to die. And anyway, do you know what? We did actually fix the problem. It was a classic turn something on and off again problem, right?
Yeah.
But it's given me a huge empathy for people who are paramedics and doctors and nurses, because what do they say to themselves when they have a problem like that?
Like when they have to make split-second decisions.
Yeah, I mean, someone really can die. What do they say to themselves? So I have a huge respect for those people. Random tangent for you.
No, of course, for sure. So this is when you got into the operational side of management. Yeah,
so at that point, I was actually not even in the management side. I was literally doing trade support.
Yeah.
So the first, say, 10 years of my career were very much either consulting or technical. I wasn't really a manager or leader of anyone. So the first, I was either a programmer or a techie or a consultant advising. And so for the first year of the financial crisis, I was very hands-on doing trade support. When I don't know, a year or so later, that we started to get glimmer of money coming back, then I could start to see projects coming back up again.
Yeah.
And as someone who was used to working in project land, and also my visa situation was a bit more sturdy now, I was willing to go and say, hey, look, and there was more contract opportunities now coming out in the market, and my whatever visa situation I was on at that time would allow me to change, work for someone else.
Yep.
So now I went back and said, look, I can see there's other projects going on.
Yep.
I really want to stay in this company, but perhaps by this date, if I'm not renewed into a project role, I'm going to have to leave. And that sounds quite aggressive, but sometimes I don't think if you force the hand, nothing's going to happen. And I was moved back into a projects role, and I ended up working for Macquarie for pretty much 10 years.
Yep.
And I'm actually, I've told you some war stories there, but I'm very grateful for my experience working there under a number of different characters and a number of different divisions, which are also very culturally different. On one hand, you've got equity markets, very high energy trade related. Then there's the hedge funds division, a very different feeling again. And then finally, like risk management, which is like the internal police in the bank. You can't do this, make sure you're complying with that and so forth. So a company experience I had was 3 different chapters of the bank, and I'm very grateful for them because ultimately they set me up in Australia.
Yeah.
So I have a lot to be grateful for.
And it would have given you exposure to a lot of different methodologies of working, especially because once you're trained in an IT or engineering degree or a way of working, your mind gets wired that way. Whereas then you get into a bank or the financial side of it, or operational management or risk management or stuff. Those are completely different dynamics on how you're supposed to process your thought, process your working, how you're supposed to handle different kinds of situations. The stakes in all those different roles are different.
Yeah, and I think Macquarie is very good at hiring very high caliber professionals. And one thing I picked up there, when I was in the UK, I'd always worked with remote teams.
Yep.
And I'd seen success, and I'd also seen lack of success. Macquarie did it very well.
Yep.
And I think the difference was that the software development team I later got involved with, particularly in the Philippines, because I ended up having a large team in the Philippines. It wasn't like, even though the team were located in somewhere else, they weren't like a team that they weren't offshoring. They were, this is our team, and we talk to this team. They start, 2 hours later than us, and they finish a couple of hours later, but they are the team. And as opposed to an engagement where you've involved a different company, and it's like, these are requirements, go deliver that, and then come back. And I really think that offshoring is a very difficult thing to get right, because you go hand something off and that company delivers it, and then when it's done, it's done. But when that team who's located in a different location are a part of your team, it can be very successful. And so I'm going down this rabbit hole because that was incredibly valuable to me because I ended up growing this team, having that team for probably 5 years, and it's now become a skill which I've taken on in my own business now, is how to run remote teams. That's what I could relate to as well, that is where the seeds for your own business would have been planted, right? That you figured that, okay, this is something that I really enjoy doing and scaling, and it's something that you feel that you're relatively comfortable and good at. And very comfortable working remotely. In fact, even in corporate world, one of the things that I pushed for in the last 2 corporate jobs that I had was for people to be moved off desktop computers and onto laptops so that they could work from home. This is well pre-pandemic. Because I think if you've got a good setup, if you are communicating well, it doesn't matter where you're located. And it just so turned out that was a huge advantage for my last corporate job when we did have the pandemic and we did go into lockdown, is that we were all used to working from home anyway. And my team could go, at that time, it was okay for my team to work 2 days from home a week without any big red tape or blessing or anything like that. They could just
even
do that.
Before the pandemic.
Before the pandemic, and now, companies are asking people to go back to the office, and that's the harder push for them. And I'm actually of the view that it's amazing if you can have an office and connect with people, and like this podcast for you and I is so much of a better connection experience than I've had in the podcasts I've done before. Because it's just to be able to see you and communicate you in this way is better.
It's more personal.
It's more personal. So it's great if an office can have a hybrid model where they can meet, but I don't think sort of forcing on you've got to be in 3 times a week is a good way. And I've learned that through working Macquarie is where I saw it done very well.
So when did you actually decide to take that leap of coming up with VirtualDOO?
Yeah, so this was, I would say, a part of the Great Resignation. Now I look at it now.
Oh, you were part of that?
I think I was a part of it, but maybe an early adopter.
Yeah.
I think, so I have been very lucky in that I've been working for corporations since I was 17. I found on one point I was lifting furniture for the army during the summer, and then someone told me that they were doing data entry at Dell. And I said, how much are they paying you? And what do you have to do? And they said, oh, they pay me £4 an hour, which is probably better than what I was getting paid. £4 an hour to do data entry. That sounds great. So I managed to get an interview, and I went there and ended up getting a great experience there, not doing data entry, actually helping them fix a database because I was technical. And so I've worked in corporate world since I was 17. First starting with Dell, IBM, Accenture, and Siemens, and Macquarie, and so forth. Great. But I think I just reached a point where I would like to know what it was like to do something different. It was just within me. And the turning point was, in my hobby life, I'm a surfer. And so you can see why Australia is so appealing to me. And when the lockdown happened in Australia, I replaced my morning commute with going surfing. And that was not only good for my physical health, but my mental health. Once you've done that morning surf in the morning, you feel you've achieved something. It's like a form of meditation. I'd argue it is. Yeah. And I would feel amazing. And so I thought to myself, I don't want to lose that, in the sense that the thought of now going back full time to a brightly lit office is not something I want. So that was one thing that was building. And then another thing that was building is I've worked long hours for a long time, and I just thought, I'd be prepared to take less money and have more hours and more flexibility, both location flexibility. Wouldn't it be great to have a business where I work remotely? And just location flexibility and time flexibility. So in my hobby world, and why I talk about surfing is I still to this day give surf reports for fun. Right, I've been doing this for a while.
Do you? Like, what do you blog about it?
It's an audio report. It started off on WhatsApp for a few friends, and then friends added more friends and more friends and more friends.
Yeah, right.
There's like 120 people in here.
So what, you just say that today the surf was like this, the water was like this, it's high tide, low tide.
I think you should do my next surf report, because that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Yes.
Really? Okay. No, I just took a blind shot at it, because
that's pretty much it.
Mate, I'm as further separated away from surfing as you can imagine.
Well, there's some potential here. I mean, that's it. I go for a surf. And so it's not a forecast, it's a report. I go for a surf and I say, okay, I went out, it was waist to chest high, I saw these great people, these are the conditions, take this kind of board. Okay. Have a great day, folks, see you in the water. That's it, 30 seconds.
You know what you should do? You should buy a GoPro and strap it to your chest next time.
I could do that. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. It's just so low maintenance. It's so easy to do. So I've been doing this for fun. It's not a commercial venture. And it's grown a community. And that was the surprising thing about it. There's all sorts of people are in this group. And there's a thing in Australia, Fluoro Friday, which is like you go up dressed in your fluoro outfit and you go surfing for mental health recognition. Okay. Things like that. So anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole about surfing. I've grown this surfing community. I do a surf report. And one day I'm talking to someone in the sea. I'm on my surfboard. And I recognize this guy because I'd also post odd pictures on Instagram. So like you were saying about your GoPro, I'd just take some pictures sometimes. And a lot of people would follow that to get the conditions as well. And I recognized that he was a business coach. I seem to remember he was a business coach who followed me. And I said, oh, you're the business coach guy? And he said, yeah. I said, I'd like to do something different. Yeah. I'm pretty much over corporate. I really, I've got these skills. I'm good at leading teams, overseeing projects and operations, driving process improvement. Can I start a business doing that? Is there something I can do? We started talking, and that conversation went for a few months before I ultimately left and resigned. And he directed me to a book called Rocket Fuel, which is about businesses typically have two characters that run it. The visionary, who's focused on strategy and relationship and the big ideas and things like that. And what they call the integrator. I hadn't heard that term. It sounds like a technical role, but basically like a COO, or as I call it in my business, a director of operations. And that's the person who's more focused on putting the rhythms in place, getting the train running smooth and on time, getting things running with the team, putting the fires out, making sure that we understand why there was a fire and making sure it doesn't happen again.
Sure.
And it explains these two characters and who they are and what their roles look like. And I went, well, I'm an integrator. That's me. That's what I do. And he said, well, this is my coach. Perhaps you can create a business where you're a fractional integrator. So you're someone who provides a COO or director of operations on a fractional basis to remote businesses. And I said, do you reckon that's a good offering? He said, do you reckon that we can get, he said, yeah, I've got customers who need this. So he, in one hand, it seems a bit different to what I was doing before, but in fact, there's a lot of things I was running large remote teams and putting fires out, you know, and making sure the team run together smoothly. So I knew how to do that. And he connected me with my first company that was based in Vancouver. And the founder was a classic visionary, has a bazillion ideas, struggles to prioritize the three that need to move the needle the most, and is overloaded, working 16-hour days, focusing on what he's going to do for his team and how he's going to get it all done, and ends up not focusing on strategy and relation. Anyway, he connected me with this guy and said, just chat to him and see if you can solve his problems for him. And so when I heard the problems, challenges he was having with his team, it sounds like he was really a part of the problem. He was just scattergunning his team with tasks every day, running on adrenaline. He didn't really know how to do it another way. His expertise were creating new innovative products and marketing them, creating a great product and service, which he's brilliant at, but not running a team at scale. And so basically that was my first client. Nice. I got this first connection and just went for it. In fact, it was the other way around. I actually resigned from my job before I got the client.
Oh, you resigned from your job before you got your first client?
I did.
Wow.
And it sounds crazy, right? But I got to the point where I was either going to go for a contract, I was either going to go and work for a startup, or I was going to go all in on this business idea that I'd been conversing with. And so I gave my company that I was working for 6 weeks notice. And in the last 2 weeks, I had that conversation with this potential client, and he signed, and that was my first client. And then from there on, when I got to 3 clients where it was me, I couldn't do any more myself. And so there was a transition point where I eventually started hiring people instead of me. And now my role in my business is I'm supporting my team. You're
a DO of your own of your own company.
It's more like I'm a coach, actually. It's more like I hire people who I think are actually have stronger skills than me, but it's a lonely sport being an entrepreneur. And I think also for someone who's running the ship, someone who's running a company, so I'm hiring people to run the operations. Sometimes they're going to encounter something, and it's good to have someone else's perspective.
Of course.
So I'm a safe place for them, and we bounce ideas around. So I've got this curly situation, Jane and Fred, and had a disagreement, and it's impacting X, Y, Z, and I'm thinking about doing this thing. What do you think, Lloyd? And I say, oh, maybe this. You know, doesn't mean my way is the right way. So now I've moved into like a coach role for my team.
Yeah, right. The term of the integrator that you used, I believe that is very appropriate because, like you said, the 2 characters required. One character is required to have the longer view of where the business is going in general and where we want to end up being. But the cost of that is that if you focus too much out on the future, you don't have time to focus on the day-to-day.
Absolutely.
And that is where the integrator comes in. That is where you come in. Your talent would then be to focus on the micro level and figuring out the bugs in the system to make sure that the machine is strong enough to carry you to that longer vision that the visionary is thinking about.
Yeah, the visionary, there comes a point where, I mean, when you start a business and it's you're everything. You're the visionary, you're the integrator, you're the person doing all the work. When you get, 5 or 6 people, you're probably still the visionary and the integrator. When you get to 10, that's like the red alert. You can't be doing that. You can't be running the operation.
It's not efficient.
It's not efficient. You're going to be what's life for if you're going to be working 16-hour days? And what's the quality of your life? It's not scalable. So that's where we fit in and help businesses. And we've mainly found a niche now of e-commerce businesses, so people selling stuff online. My first client was called The Beard Struggle. Okay. I'm obviously highly qualified to have a beard. You have a great beard too. You'd be a great client.
It's like looking into a mirror.
it is. We've got similar beard style.
Similar glasses.
Yeah.
We're losing hair at the same rate.
We should have. It's like we should have planned coordinated shirts as well. And so the beard struggle, I was like a chief bearded officer for them.
Wow.
And
you got skin in the game there, like.
and so that's the kind of customer we were getting. E-commerce, so people selling products online. They were selling beard oils, and I think they're still the biggest player in beard oil.
Okay.
And also like high-end products, like a heated beard brush, which is like a hair straightener for your beard. Right? That's about $200 US. I'm probably going.
Nice.
So they're a great company, and since then we've taken on other e-commerce businesses that we run their operations for, and marketing agencies. That seems to be our area we focus on the most. We've done other things because when you start a business, you don't really know
what direction you're going in.
Yeah, what the target is. You just try a bit of here and a bit of there. And I think marketing agencies and e-commerce businesses have one thing in common, and it's the visionaries. The visionaries in those businesses are the ultra creative, and doing operations they can probably do, but it destroys their soul. Yeah, like they don't want to do that. So those are the kind of business.
And for I think for founders like that, doing the operational management, it saps away a lot of the energy that they should otherwise be putting into strategizing for the business.
I mean, the first that beard company, right? They later got retail businesses, so they were all online, and then they managed to get their product into shop floors. That could have happened a lot earlier if that business owner wasn't stuck in the operations of his business. So they should be focusing on strategy and relationships and sales, really.
Sure. VirtualDOO has a good social media presence online, LinkedIn, Instagram, and all of these other platforms. I'll post a link for Lloyd's own profile and for his business's profile in the description for this video. It's what I found was that in a lot of, when I was doing research for this interview, right, I wanted to find out about, what your expertise are, what you share, what you bring to the table in terms of operations management. And what I found was that the term that you put is running around and putting out fires. I think that is the most apt description that I can think of, because I can sort of relate to for a new entrepreneur who's trying to develop a digital business, for them not to understand the operational side of it if they haven't had any prior experience in it. It's something close to home because a really close contact of mine is recently trying to synthesize this idea of developing a digital business, but they have the vision for the business. They know what they want to do. They know where they want to end up and what the business is going to look like, but they do not know how to set up the actual foundation to come up with a business like that. So that's something they're synthesizing at the moment. And that is where I believe somebody like you or somebody with the expertise that you're offering plugs in, because that really, that like rocket fuel, it basically fuels and it accelerates that growth to a point that, okay, now it becomes a sustainable system that is basically running itself. So I can definitely see the space in the market for something like that.
We want to get to a point where entrepreneurs they've got fires because they're running it all themselves, and we want to put those fires out and put sustainable rhythms in place. And it works, I think, because we work on a month-to-month basis. So they can have us in on a month-to-month basis. So someone who's fractional, meaning they're working for multiple businesses. And the way they tend to go is they tend to be, I think our average client time is 6 to 8 months. It can be shorter, could be longer. We've had some for over 2 years now, which is, I had my business 2.5 years. That's great.
Sure.
And sometimes what happens is, and we're totally fine with this, is that someone inside of that business is seeing what we're doing and they've learned how we want to put the rhythms in and they want to step into those shoes. And we're fine with that. What we're looking for is give us a reference to the next place. That's how my business has grown. We just go in, do our best, and get the references and move on and so forth. And of course, I remain top of mind on social media as well and share education-based content.
Of course. So based on all of that, I guess in terms of like from the professional side of it, one question that I would have for you that I think would be important for anybody who's listening and he's thinking that, okay, this is something that maybe I could implement in another part of the world where somebody might be watching this, that there might be a requirement in their market for something like this. For somebody starting out a business like that, for a consultancy or a coaching business like you did, what's something that you believe you had known when you started 2 years ago that you now know that would have helped you?
I think what I've realized is the importance of community. And that's just, all the way through our conversation, that's been a theme.
Yeah.
So my experience for me is I didn't know sales and marketing, right?
Yeah.
So I've had to learn that on the way. But it's being in a community with other entrepreneurs where I've been able to get help from their skills. So community and mentorship is so important, because in my business, I've made loads of mistakes.
Yeah.
Loads of mistakes that I've now learned from. I won't do that again. And I think you can get where you're going a lot faster if you have community and if you have a mentor. It's just they would have gone through those things themselves. So I would say embrace a community. If you're an entrepreneur, find an entrepreneurial community that you can be a part of. And if you don't have a mentor who's done something similar to what you're doing before, get a mentor. And there's a quote I heard the other day. I'm probably going to stuff it up. It's along the lines of, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Go together.
And that really resonates with me immediately. I get it.
Of course, 100%. So we'll be looking forward to a lot of other social media posts coming out of Lloyd, maybe a new Instagram channel called Surfing with LT. So, that there's an idea for you. Awesome. Amazing experience having Lloyd on the podcast. Always, I thoroughly enjoy conversations where there's so much to talk about back and forth, and, digging into somebody's experiences and finding out how they ended up being the person that they are. I get a kick out of it. I enjoy a good chat. Right. So the final question, as you know, I always end with is that based on all of your experiences, your life back from in the UK, from a military background, something as rigid as the military, then going into something as creatively open as the IT, then working for a bank, coming to Australia, the Mongol Rally, working in loads of different industries, and now being having lived through a pandemic and a financial crisis in the ripe old age of 40, having experienced all of that, Lloyd, what is your one nugget of truth that life has taught you that you could pass on to other people?
There's always help if you ask for it. So if you are willing to receive and you put yourself out there and you ask for help, you can get it. And when I experienced on the Mongol Rally, there's no way I could have done that on my own.
Yep.
So ask for help. It was only the other day I was guest hosting on guest speaking on a podcast. I think Sylvia, who's been a guest of yours here, I was talking there, and someone reached out to me afterwards, and she has just moved here from Thailand.
Yep.
And she was looking for how she might set up. And I said, let me connect you with a few people in my network. So she took a bold move to just ask me. Yeah. She's like, maybe he knows. So she's now found herself a job here, and she's relocating from Melbourne to Sydney because she's got a job and she's been hooked into a network. I think that's the key thing is put yourself out there, ask for help. Yeah. And the previous point as well, find yourself a community, find yourself a tribe. If you look, you'll find.
We tend to be afraid of being judged by other people for our lack of knowledge. Whereas that shouldn't be a factor at all. Because if you're starting out, whether you're starting a business, you're starting a job, you're starting a degree, you're starting anything, you will invariably start from zero. And in that journey, there are two ways to go about it. Like you said, you can go by yourself and try to make those mistakes along the way and learn. Or you can find somebody who has already made those mistakes and piggyback off of their knowledge. Yeah. Having the ability to put yourself in a vulnerable position and ask for help, I think that really makes a huge difference on how quickly you can accumulate knowledge.
I think being an entrepreneur, if you're going to be a big ego and be so concerned about your failures, it's going to be a very difficult path for you. But if you're someone who is, let's give this a try, let's ask that person for help and be vulnerable.
Yeah.
It can be a struggle, but you'll get there so much faster. And that's what being an entrepreneur is. I think it is putting yourself out there as a large part of it.
Perfect point to end the conversation on. And I need your help. Hit that subscribe button, and also within the all of these social media platforms you see over here, you can give us a follow on that. I'll be posting a link to Lloyd's LinkedIn profile, his business website, and all of the other stuff that he's been doing in the description for this video. If anybody wants to get in touch with Lloyd in all the other aspects that he's working on as a coach, as a director of operations, please feel free to reach out to him. I'd love to have Lloyd on some other time to have another conversation such as this. Until such time, you've been watching In The Gap. I have been Hussain, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.